Hello everyone, Jester Bell is back. I hope I'm not too close to the camera today as I have my makeshift Thanksgiving setup. Today, we are going to be talking about Disney. And has Disney finally changed? Has Disney finally gotten back from what I think is the worst era in Disney animation history, an era worse than after Walt Disney died and they thought that there might not even be an animation industry after the 70s? Has Disney survived and are we back to getting good movies from them again? And after just such an abysmal year at the theater, did I finally watch something good? Before we get into all of that, I think that you guys might need a little recap of the state of Disney animation and why it's been so bad, and why we got that weird Moana 2 movie last year that was just a repurposed Disney Plus show. So, to just let you know what has happened, John Lasseter was the creative head of both Disney Pixar and Disney Animation after he was ousted after some allegations during the Me Too era. After that, you had Pete Docter and Jennifer Lee take over Pixar and Disney Animation, respectively. Now, we're mainly going to be talking about what happened at Disney Animation after this. From what I've heard, some of this is from articles that have come out, and some of this is from leaks behind the scenes, because there is a lot of this that, in my opinion, they would never publish, at least now, in an actual mainstream article. Disney would never let it be published. But everyone knows, and this is mainstream information, that Jennifer Lee's run at Disney Animation was absolutely awful, abysmal. Raya the Last Dragon, Wish, which I think might be one of the worst Disney animation movies ever made, if you want to really take in all the context of what went on behind there. Strange Worlds, just all of these failed. Jennifer Lee's was not prepared, was not equipped to run Disney Animation Studios, and she very much put, what her viewpoints and what kind of ideology she wanted to push first. That was what was put first on what the movies wanted to achieve. And as I've heard behind the scenes, that also included who she wanted to hire behind the scenes, that she would hire a lot of people, from Tumblr and Reddit. That is what the leaks came out were, so that they would be of the same viewpoints as her, so they would go along with what she wanted to do with these films. And from that viewpoint, as she was ousting all of the old animators from Disney Animation and bringing in these new people, that is also why you not only saw story quality decline, but animation decline, as we saw especially with Wish. It was just completely incompetently animated. Now, once again, and I've heard word behind the scenes and these leaks that were allegedly from Disney animators, that Jennifer Lee just ran a horrible animation studio and that it was just a very, very toxic environment. And so it was really no surprise, after she had not been able to produce any hits, really, that she was ousted out of Disney Animation as the creative head. And I know that they just said that she stepped down just to focus more on Frozen 3. She was demoted. Anyone watching what is actually happening knows that she was demoted, and Jared Bush took over. Now, when Jared Bush took over, he was the director of the first Zootopia, and he's doing Zootopia 2 that we're talking about today. But here is the big deal. They were supposed to have a new animated movie that was going to be under Jennifer Lee's Disney Animation that was coming out last year. It was an original movie. They shelved that. They completely took it off the schedule, and that is where Moana 2 comes in. Because what I heard from behind the scenes is that Disney Animation was in such disarray that they were not in the position to put out a good movie at the time. So what did they do? Well, they had the Moana Disney Plus series that was being made by a completely different animation studio, I think off in Canada. And so they took that and repurposed it into a movie, and that is how we got Moana 2 last year. Now, it was awful, yes, but Jared Bush's gamble paid off, and it made a lot of money, and it bought him time to finally create a new movie to try to get it to sell at the box office. And that brings us all the way to Zootopia 2, which is the first movie that we have that is made where, when Jennifer Lee was ousted, she might have been there a bit in the beginning of the creative process of this, but this is the first actual movie from Jared Bush's Disney Animation Studio. The very first movie that wasn't just him trying to buy time with Moana 2. So, with all of that put out there, does Zootopia 2 deliver? Or do we finally see that Disney is changing a bit after this entire awful year? Have they finally been able to put out something good? Well, yes. I did really enjoy this movie, and I actually am willing to go see it again, and it's a really big relief to see at the end of the year. However, is it as good as the movies that Disney was releasing in their Renaissance period? And is it as good as one of those films? I would say no. I think, like, I want to just say, I really enjoyed this film, and I had a great time watching it, and I'm going to see it again, and I think it is by far the best thing that Disney Animation has put out since Encanto. Encanto, by the way, was in production for so long. It actually was long in production before the Jennifer Lee stuff took over. That one was just in development for so long. That's why that was the one movie that was a bit different. But yes, Zootopia 2, it is definitely the best movie I have seen from Disney Animation and Pixar in a very, very long time. Like, the best movie that makes me feel like we are coming out of that old regime that came about, post Me Too from Disney, and it makes me hope that we are turning a corner with all of this stuff at last. However, it still is not as good as those other brilliant Disney films. This movie is not going to be winning any Oscars. There's just elements to it that just fall short. It's a perfectly serviceable and fun film to watch, but there are elements that if you want to compare it to those grand Disney movies of the past, the ones that appeal to everyone, the ones that are Oscar worthy, then it does not reach those heights. So let's get into it though. Like, what makes Zootopia 2 an enjoyable watch compared to all of these other just crappy Disney films that we've gotten up to this point? Well, for one thing, the animation is actually good. Now, I wouldn't say that the animation, like, it really stood out to me as groundbreaking or anything, but it's just competent, and it's on the same standard that Disney used to have. And, like, we can look up, like, Jared Bush was a Disney animation veteran working at Zootopia. He was the director of the original, but, you can tell, like, he is the one who said, like, after allegedly Jennifer Lee got rid of all the old animators, apparently Jared Bush brought them back. Like, we had one official word from it that they got one of the directors who did Aladdin to come and teach the new animators, like, how to do the film. And I would imagine they got even more than that. But you can really tell the difference here, that after just seeing something like Wish, or even, like, the films that they're still trying to churn out made from that era in Pixar, like Elio and Hoppers, like, the animation here is just back to Disney's standards that they always had. So you can really tell that Jared Bush must have turned things around, at least somewhat behind the scenes, in terms of just the decay that had happened under Jennifer Lee's regime, because the animation actually looks good. There was never a time where it broke my immersion or I really noticed a major flaw in it. And it just goes to show, like, they never should have gotten the original animators who actually know how to animate Disney movies. They need to stay around to teach the next generation. So that really shows. It really shows that Jared Bush took it upon himself to bring back the original animators to actually bring this movie back up to standards. Now, in terms of, like, the entertainment value of this film, like, it's got a fast pace, and the characters are really fun to watch, and there's a lot of comedy, and a lot of the comedy even landed for me. Like, I laughed a few times. You could argue that it skews a little younger. Like, Disney films can be, movies that are just good enough that both adults and kids can enjoy them. They can be, very, very high quality. I think that some of there's a lot of slapstick, and there's a lot of, like, noise humor and sight gags and stuff like that it did make me feel like maybe this is skewing a little bit more for younger kids. But overall, like, I really enjoyed, like, the dynamic between Judy and Nick. I enjoyed, like, the fun characters that they introduced in this film. The characters, like, the side ones, they were actually memorable. Like, Elio, I am not going to remember any of the side characters in that film. But this film, like, I will remember the new side characters that they introduced, because they had very, very distinct personalities. Now, the funny thing about this film is I think that it is very self-aware of the shipping fandom that came about after the first movie, because they do make Nick and Judy's relationship very romantically coded. Now, it's not actual romance. It's like they'll get up to a certain point and then they'll just call each other friend. Like, that is what will happen in this film. I mean, Bella Notte even plays during one of the scenes in this movie when she said that they're celebrating their 1 week anniversary as cop pop partners and stuff like that. So this movie was made very, very aware of the fandom off of Zootopia, but it did not dip into any of the weird stuff. Now, Disney Animation and Disney in general, I still have yet to see them actually go through with a legitimate romance in a film. They make everyone friends. In this case, I'm fine with that, because then that brings up the whole discussion of how does it work? Can bunnies and foxes get together in in this universe? So I'm perfectly fine with them just keeping them friends, but I felt like they kind of walked up to a line and didn't cross it with their relationship in this film, and it's like they're so aware of the fan base around this movie. But anyway, still, I enjoyed their friendship in this movie. I enjoyed their development. I think that, Ke Huy Quan is voicing the snake in this movie, and his voice is just perfect for animation. And, it was just very enjoyable because it kept, a good pace of plot developments and humor and the environments, and this is the same thing I'll praise about the first Zootopia. The environments are so detailed about how this world works and the little tongue-in-cheek references to how different animals live and how different animals in these different environments are supposed to be representative of different people, like the reptiles, which are centered in this movie, definitely are just Southern Americans. So it's all just so detailed in the animation and how they've crafted this world, and it made it so that there was always something keeping me engaged with this movie. There was always something new to watch. I never felt like, as I've felt with so many other movies this year, I want to get out my phone, I want to go home, or anything like that. We were always kept at a good pace with the character development and all of that. Now, on that note, me talking about this not being as good as different Disney films, well, yeah, and here's how I'll explain it. I would compare this to more Disney animation's Inside Out 2, even though I think it's a little bit better than Inside Out 2. I think that Jared Bush is just we're sinking right now. We're on the Titanic, and we need to do things to actually save this studio. We need to actually put up or shut up with actually making a film that people want to see. So I would be curious if we're going to get another one of those many, many articles that have come out after Disney Pixar films about how Disney Pixar films have been crunching and trying to get out all of the political topics and all of that stuff. And, we have gotten Inside Out 2, I would say, is the only film that's kind of worked like that and actually was successful and actually was watchable in theaters. I would be interested to know if Zootopia 2 similarly might have had some stronger political allegory in it and that they took it out and that this film was just about crunching to make sure you get something at least watchable and entertaining out. Once again, it is a very quick-paced film, but it does not have much complexity or much depth to it. It's very, very basic. Just, as Judy and Nick are trying to reconcile their differences, it's just very, very basic. Let's not let our differences tear us apart. That's the entire point of the movie. Zootopia, the first one, I would say, had a lot more political references in it to what was going on in the real world at the time. And I don't think that this one, I think you could read into things if you wanted to, but this one, I do think that they are playing it very, very safe, and there's not going to be anything that anyone takes an issue with. It's just very, very, basic theme, not letting differences tear us apart and things like that. They don't really go any deeper into a racial allegory than the first movie did or anything like that. And I think all of that is intentional after Disney has gotten themselves into so much trouble where they have people who don't know how to do story that put their political views first. And so that was interesting. I don't think that there's going to be anything that really divides people about this film, but once again, it's very, very simple. Now, one of the things I will think was interesting about the film, it is kind of a time capsule as it's made almost 10 years after the first one. And, it is referencing things in real life that I think have changed since then. My favorite reference was they do in the first movie, they pass by someone who's selling Blu-rays on the black market. And in that one, he's just selling Blu-rays. This time, somebody is selling Blu-rays and he's like, get your remakes, your requels, your sequels. Who said the industry is dying? And that made me laugh because I'm like, it's true. That's what I say on this channel all the time. And, on the one hand, it's kind of like Marvel making fun of themselves going all multiverse when they're still doing the multiverse in Deadpool and Wolverine. It's like, you're making these jokes, but you're the company that's perpetuating all these requels and remakes and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I just thought it was funny because I say that all the time and there's people who are like, the industry isn't dying on here still. And it's kind of nice to see a mainstream movie even acknowledge that. Ironically, it's going to be Zootopia 2 that saves things. But yeah, it is very referential to where we are now 10 years later and what pop culture looks like now. Once again, on the political side of this film, they introduced someone who's a podcaster. And I thought, is this going to be where the divisive politics come in, talking about podcasters and, I don't know, the evils of podcasting podcasters and whatnot. No, the character who's a podcaster actually turns out to be one of the good guys and is, one of their friends and one of the most promoted characters in the film. So I didn't see anything there, but I did think it was interesting that, they kind of acknowledge where we are with remakes and sequels and requels and podcasters, and as well, there is a theme in this movie about therapy, and this one I do have my thoughts on, not because necessarily it damaged. Okay, here's the thing. They bring in the idea of therapy in this film, and I think that this is, once again, I understand why they did it, because it's sort of referencing, what the trends are now compared to where they were in 2016. Therapy is a huge trend, so I don't mind them bringing it in. However, it becomes a plot device for, at the end, Nick and Judy to just kind of vomit dump how they've really been feeling and what the real problems are in their relationship and what they've been holding back on and how to fix that. I thought that made it a bit too convenient, and it made it a bit shallow, because it's very, very simple, these things that they're dealing with, and just to vomit it out there. It just seemed very, very simple to wrap up the plot. And so, and I would have questions about therapy. Like, I don't think our current obsession with therapy is actually helping anything, but that's neither here nor there. But it's just like this film, to get to the flaws of it, it's just much, much more simplistic than a lot, if we're comparing it to a lot of the highbrow Disney films of the past. Like, for example, the Snake character played by Ke Huy Quan, he calls Judy his best friend. And that, in a better Disney movie, that probably would have been a tearjerker moment, but it wasn't, because I'm like, we barely got to see them spend any time together or bond, so I don't feel like they're best friends. I don't feel anything from that. Same with Nick and Judy's relationship. Like, the development is there, but I felt like they could have gone deeper with it and made more than just, vomit dumping what the actual problems are and, coming together in therapy and all of that. I thought that could have been done a lot better. And then there's a twist in it, and it felt like there was just a twist, and it's self-aware, and it acknowledges this just because there was a twist villain in the first movie. And it was so obvious, and the villain just is terrible, and he will not be remembered, and it's like there's no effort into making him interesting at all, and he's just kind of there. And then the ending just keeps kind of happening like they don't have as big a climax to go to, or I should say, as big as a Big Bang ending to go to, so it just keeps going on and on and on. And it's like stuff like that. It's a very simplistic film. It doesn't really delve really deep into themes or anything, or the character development is very simple. It's more just a fun romp than anything really deep. And I think that that's the intention behind the scenes of Disney. It's like, you don't need to make an Oscar-worthy film. You don't need to make anything that is really, breaking down barriers. You don't need to make anything that is going to be a major risk. Just please, for the love of everything reasonable, put out a film that is at least entertaining and competently made, unlike all the other slop that we've been putting out and that doesn't, tick someone off. So I that's why I feel like this is Disney's Inside Out 2. Is it like an Oscar-worthy film? Is it the best film that Disney's ever made? Absolutely not. And there's definitely a lot more flaws in it than the first film and a lot of the other classic Disney films. And it's not groundbreaking or anything. It's just a decent sequel. Like, it doesn't tear anything down from the first film. It doesn't break down the barriers, but it's not a bad movie either. It's an enjoyable watch. So hopefully this means that Disney has turned a corner where they can at least put out something good for once, and so that's a first step. Now, I know that this is a cash grab and it's going to make so much money, but maybe this is showing a good first step to getting to an area where we can get good original films again if we're able to at least make a sequel that's halfway decent to watch. So yeah, I hope that this is a sign of Disney animation finally turning a corner, but I feel like next year we're still going to see a lot of leftovers, like Hoppers from Pixar is a leftover, and Star Wars and The Mandalorian, and there's just no sign of that or Marvel changing. But I hope that at least Disney Animation Studio is showing good signs with changing with this. So in other words, really enjoyed Zootopia 2. Probably like 8 out of 10 film. Might go down to 7 out of 10 if I watch it again and really am able to think about it further. But enjoyable film. I will see it again. And I'm very relieved to finally get a film that was not terrible this year. And I'm happy. Like, I love Disney animation. And my whole thing is I want to see them change if they can. And I want to see that studio save so we can actually get good films again. But that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And if you want to support my work, please consider checking out Patreon and memberships. And I will see you guys next time.